After my stroke, I was partially paralyzed. My son abandoned me. In a cheap nursing home, he didn't know I had just received a millionaire inheritance. This is my story of how I lost everything, only to gain something far more valuable, my dignity. Subscribe to our channel and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. The fluorescent lights in Sunset Care Home buzzed above me like angry wasps as I struggled to button my cardigan with fingers that refused to cooperate. 8 months after my stroke, my left side still betrayed me daily, a constant reminder of how quickly life can change. Need help with that, Mrs. Sullivan? A young aide poked her head in, already backing out before I could answer. They were always rushing here, too many patients, too few staff. I can manage, I lied, my professor's pride still intact even as my body failed me. It took 3 more minutes of fumbling before I gave up, leaving the buttons misaligned. I glanced at the clock. 2:15 p.m. Robert was late, as usual. My only child, my son who promised he'd always take care of me after I sold my house to fund his business venture 10 years ago. The same business that now apparently afforded him a new Lexus, while I sat in this glorified storage facility for the elderly. When he finally arrived at 2:40, he didn't apologize for his tardiness. "Hey, Mom." He kissed my cheek perfunctorily, the scent of expensive cologne hanging in the air between us. "How's it going today?" The food was cold again, and I waited 2 hours for someone to help me to physical therapy. I kept my voice steady, determined not to sound like the complaining old woman they all expected. Robert checked his watch, then his phone. "They're understaffed everywhere these days." "I was thinking," I said carefully, "that maybe with some in-home help I could manage at my—" I caught myself. "Not my house anymore." "At your guest room? Perhaps." His sigh was barely concealed. "Mom, we've discussed this. I can't afford private home care. This place is what fits our budget right now." Our budget. As if my teacher's pension that helped pay for this place was insignificant compared to his contribution. "Did Melissa enjoy the Disney trip?" I asked instead, changing the subject to my granddaughter. His eyes widened slightly, caught off guard. "How did you—" "Jason showed me pictures on his phone last visit. The Cinderella castle looked beautiful at night." Robert shifted uncomfortably. "It was a package deal, very affordable." The words hung between us like an accusation. His definition of affordable apparently included vacations, but not adequate care for his mother. "Lisa and the kids send their love," he said, already standing. "I've got a client meeting at 4, so I should get going." 20 minutes. That's what I was worth in his busy schedule. After he left, I wheeled myself to the window, watching his gleaming car pull away. 10 years ago, when John died, I'd sold our home of 30 years, the home where Robert had grown up, and handed my son nearly every penny to save his failing business. "I'll always take care of you, Mom," he'd promised as I signed away my independence. That's what family does. A light knock interrupted my thoughts. Diana, the youngest nurse on staff, entered with a gentle smile. "Rough visit?" she asked, noting my expression. "Just short," I replied, my throat tight. She knelt beside my wheelchair, her eyes kind. "You know, Mrs. Sullivan, some people don't deserve the parents they have." I covered her hand with mine, grateful for this small compassion from a stranger when my own blood offered none. "Diana," I said quietly, "how much longer until my physical therapy evaluation?" "That's actually why I came. Dr. Patel moved your assessment up. He thinks you might benefit from a more intensive program." For the first time that day, I felt a flicker of hope. "More intensive means more progress?" "It could. You've been working harder than most patients I see." She paused. "I've watched you practicing your exercises when you think no one's looking." I hadn't realized anyone had noticed my private struggles in the bathroom mirror. Willing my left hand to grasp the hairbrush, commanding my foot to pivot properly. "Determination matters more than age," Diana continued. "My grandmother recovered from a worse stroke at 72. As she helped me navigate to the therapy room, I pondered Robert's dismissal of my recovery potential. Everyone here saw me as a permanent resident, slowly declining until I eventually disappeared entirely. But what if they were wrong? What if I wasn't finished yet? Dr. Patel's evaluation was thorough. When he finished, he looked at me with professional candor. "Mrs. Sullivan, with consistent work, I believe you could regain significant function. Not everything, but enough to potentially live more independently with proper support." I straightened in my wheelchair. "Define proper support." "That depends on your resources." "Resources? The word echoed in my mind as I was wheeled back to my room. The resources I'd given away, believing in promises that had evaporated as quickly as Robert had from my room today. As the afternoon light faded, I made a decision. I would document everything, every neglected call button, every cold meal, every promised visit that never materialized. My tablet, which Robert had reluctantly let me keep, "What does a woman your age need with technology?" would become my record. I might be physically diminished, but my mind, the mind that had analyzed literature and taught generations of students to find hidden meanings, was still razor sharp, and it was telling me something was very wrong with my son's sudden inability to meet my needs. "Mrs. Sullivan, your medications." The night nurse's voice barely registered as I stared at the institutional beige wall, counting the water stains shaped like continents I'd never visit. 2 weeks had passed since Robert's last visit. No calls, no texts, just silence. I swallowed the pills without question, a routine as predictable as the indignities that structured my days at Sunset Care Home. This morning, I'd waited 40 minutes for assistance to the bathroom. By the time someone responded, it was too late. The humiliation burned hotter than any physical pain. "The physical therapist left this for you." The nurse handed me a printed exercise sheet before hurrying out to her next patient. I studied the diagrams, tracing the movements with my good hand first, then attempting to mirror them with my weaker side. Small victories counted here. Today I could lift my left arm 3 inches higher than yesterday. Progress measured in centimeters, in seconds, in breaths. "You're working those exercises pretty hard." I looked up to find an elegant older woman watching me from the doorway, leaning on a walker decorated with colorful yarn pom-poms. "Eleanor Phillips," she introduced herself with a smile that reached her eyes. "Room 218. I've seen you in therapy." "Margaret Sullivan," I replied, lowering my trembling arm. "Room 157. She navigated to the visitor's chair with practiced efficiency. "You're new. Stroke? Is it that obvious?" "My husband had one 6 years ago. I recognize the exercises." She settled herself comfortably. "The left side's affected, yes?" Mine was the right. "Your husband recovered well?" I asked hopefully. Her smile faltered. "Charles passed last year, pneumonia, but he'd regained enough mobility to play with our great-granddaughter. That meant everything to him." We sat in comfortable silence before Eleanor spoke again. "My daughter's supposed to visit today. She manages my finances, now says it's easier that way." There was something in her tone that made me ask, "And is it? Easier?" Eleanor's laugh held no humor. "She bought a new car with my retirement money last month, but she brings the grandchildren at Easter, so I don't complain." Before I could respond, a conversation in the hallway caught my attention. "Moved to a shared room to reduce costs," her son called again. It was Gretchen, the charge nurse with permanently pinched features. "Didn't he just cancel his visit?" Another voice responded. "Says his mother exaggerates her needs, always has according to him. Typical family dumping ground situation." My body went cold. Robert was reducing my care, claiming I exaggerated? Eleanor noticed my expression and reached for my hand. "You heard something unpleasant." I nodded, unable to speak past the betrayal lodged in my throat. "The walls here might as well be made of paper," she said. "I've learned more about my children from overheard phone calls than from their actual visits." That evening, I powered up my tablet, the one connection to independence Robert had reluctantly allowed me to keep. My grandchildren had insisted, arguing their grandmother needed to see their baseball games and dance recitals through video calls. Those calls rarely came now. I opened a new document and began typing awkwardly with my right hand. Day 1 of documentation. Robert canceled visit. Overheard staff saying he's requested I be moved to a shared room to reduce costs. Claims I exaggerate my needs. Waited 40 minutes for bathroom assistance today. Meal was cold again. PT says improvement possible with intensive therapy. I synced the document to my email account, creating a record that existed beyond these walls. A small act of self-preservation that felt surprisingly powerful. As I prepared for bed, Diana stopped by for her evening rounds. "I heard the Johnsons are moving Mr. Peterson to a shared room," I commented casually. Diana's hands paused while checking my blood pressure. "The facility director makes those decisions, not the Johnsons. But family requests carry weight?" She met my eyes. "They shouldn't, not when it impacts care quality. But money talks, Mrs. Sullivan, especially in places like this." I nodded, adding another note to my mental file. "You know," Diana said, voice lowered, There are resources for elder advocacy, organizations that help navigate these situations. What situations? When families make decisions that may not align with a patient's best interests. The blood pressure cuff tightened uncomfortably. Or perhaps it was just the truth squeezing my heart. I'd be interested in learning more, I said, my professor's thirst for knowledge merging with something newer and sharper, self-protection. That night, I dreamed of my house, the one I'd sold, to save Robert's business. In the dream, I stood in my old kitchen, fully mobile, making Sunday dinner while John read the newspaper at the table, glasses perched on his nose. The home we'd built together, sacrificed for a son who now considered me a burden. I woke with tears on my face and a resolution forming in my mind. Something had to change. I just didn't know how to make it happen with my limited resources and increasingly limited body. Limited. Little did I know, change was already moving toward me in the form of a long-delayed letter. Mrs. Sullivan, there's mail for you. Diana's voice pulled me from the fog of afternoon medication. 3 weeks at Sunset Care Home had taught me the rhythm of institutional living. Wake, medicate, eat, therapy, rest, eat, medicate, sleep, rinse and repeat until death provided the only real escape. Mail was an anomaly in this sterile routine. It's been sitting at the front desk for a while, Diana apologized, handing me a crisp envelope. Sometimes things get overlooked. The return address read, Winters and Associates, Attorneys at Law, Boston, Massachusetts. My fingers trembled as I opened it, and not just from post-stroke weakness. Dear Ms. Sullivan, we regret to inform you of the passing of Harold Blackwood on March 15th. As executors of Mr. Blackwood's estate, we are contacting you as a named beneficiary in his will. Please contact our office at your earliest convenience to discuss this matter. Sincerely, James Winters, Escumern Harold, my mother's brother, the uncle who had paid for my college education when my parents couldn't afford it, the brilliant engineer whose letters had sustained me through graduate school. The family connection that had dissolved after my marriage to John, a man my uncle had warned, was beneath my potential. Harold had been right about John's financial irresponsibility, but wrong about his heart. We'd been happy despite our modest means. After our estrangement, I'd occasionally followed Harold's career through professional journals, patents filed, innovations credited to his name, but we hadn't spoken in over 40 years. Bad news? Diana asked, noting my expression. My uncle died, I whispered, the words inadequate for the complex emotions colliding inside me. Grief for a relationship long lost, regret for decades of silence, and bewilderment at being named in his will. I'm sorry for your loss, Diana said automatically. I lost him a long time ago, I replied. We hadn't spoken since before Robert was born. With Diana's help, I called the number on the letterhead. After navigating a labyrinth of receptionists, I reached James Winters himself. Mrs. Sullivan, he greeted me warmly. I'm pleased you contacted us. I understand you're currently in a care facility. I explained my situation briefly, the stroke, my limited mobility, the arrangement with my son. I see, he said, his tone shifting subtly. Perhaps I should speak with your son about the inheritance then. As your caretaker? Something in his phrasing sent warning signals through my mind. What exactly did my uncle leave me, Mr. Winters? A pause. Harold Blackwood left you his entire estate, Mrs. Sullivan. After taxes and fees, it's valued at approximately $8 million. The room tilted. I gripped my wheelchair armrest, anchoring myself against the vertigo of sudden possibility. Mrs. Sullivan? Are you there? Yes, I managed. I'm just surprised. Your uncle never married or had children. He had quite a successful career in engineering and patent development. According to our records, he kept every letter you sent him during your college years. He mentioned you often in our meetings. A tide of emotion washed over me. Harold had remembered me all these years, had thought of me while I'd been building my life, raising Robert, teaching my students. Should I contact your son to help facilitate the transfer of assets? Mr. Winters prompted again. The question crystallized something inside me. A lifetime of making responsible choices, of putting others first, of trusting family, and where had it left me? In a substandard care facility, waiting 40 minutes for bathroom assistance, while my son canceled visits and plotted to reduce my care. No, I said firmly. Not yet. I'd like to understand my options first. Of course, Mr. Winters replied, his tone suggesting approval. We can arrange a private consultation. Given your mobility issues, perhaps I could come to you? As we finished the call, Diana returned with my evening meal, lukewarm meatloaf and congealed gravy. "Everything okay?" she asked, noting my dazed expression. I considered telling her, this kind young woman who'd shown me more compassion than my own son had in months. But caution, a new protective instinct, held me back. "Just processing," I said. My uncle was not someone I expected to remember me. That night, I added to my growing digital journal, "Harold remembered me. All these years while I was teaching literature to ungrateful freshmen, raising an increasingly distant son, and gradually losing John to heart disease, Harold remembered our connection. While I gave everything to a son who now considers me a burden, my estranged uncle held me in his heart enough to leave me his fortune. What does this mean for me now? For the remaining years of my life? $8 million. The figure danced through my dreams that night, not as visions of luxury or indulgence, but as something far more precious: options, freedom, control over my own destiny for whatever time I had left. Morning brought clarity and resolve. I needed to move carefully, strategically. This unexpected gift from Harold could change everything, but only if I was smarter about it than I'd been about selling my house to Robert. I would need allies, information, a plan, and most importantly, I would need to understand exactly who my son had become in the years I'd spent seeing only what I wanted to see. "Mom, I got your message. What's this about financial news?" Robert burst into my room without knocking, his tie slightly askew, the only visible crack in his usually polished exterior. I'd called him yesterday with a deliberately vague message about important financial matters we need to discuss. After weeks of ignored calls and canceled visits, it had taken only the hint of money to bring him running. "Hello, Robert. It's good to see you too." I folded my hands in my lap, a gesture of calm I didn't entirely feel. He had the decency to look slightly abashed. "Sorry. Work's been crazy. How are you feeling?" "About the same as when you last asked 3 weeks ago." He winced, then pulled up the visitor's chair. "You mentioned something financial?" I studied my son's face, the face I'd once wiped ice cream from. The face I'd watched graduate college. The face that now showed more interest in me than it had in months. All because of the possibility of money. "I received a letter," I began, measuring my words carefully. "My Uncle Harold passed away." "Uncle Harold? Mom, I don't think you've ever mentioned. My mother's brother. We were close when I was younger, before I married your father." I paused. "He's included me in his will." The transformation was immediate and disturbing. Robert's posture straightened, his expression softened, his entire demeanor shifted from impatient to attentive. "That's unexpected. Was he well off?" I nodded, deliberately vague. "He had a successful engineering career. Patents, innovations." "Wow, that's great news, Mom." Robert leaned forward, his smile suddenly wide and eager. "You know, I've been thinking, this place isn't really giving you the care you deserve. We might be able to find somewhere better." "Better than what your budget allows?" I couldn't keep the edge from my voice. He didn't notice. "Absolutely. Maybe even home care. You could move in with us for a while." The offer I'd begged for months ago now extended freely at the mere suggestion of inheritance money. "That's quite a change of heart," I observed. "Last time we discussed home care, you said it was impossible." "Well, circumstances change," he waved dismissively. "How much are we talking about here, Mom?" The question hung between us, naked in its avarice. "I'm not entirely sure," I lied. "The lawyer says the estate is still being settled. Death taxes, legal fees, that sort of thing." Robert's expression flickered with impatience. "But a ballpark? Thousands? More?" "Mr. Winters, that's Harold's attorney, says it will take time to get the full picture. These things are complicated. I can help with that. I know people who specialize in estate matters." Of course he did. People who would tell him exactly how to access my money most efficiently. "That's thoughtful, but Mr. Winters seems quite competent." I changed the subject. "How are Lisa and the kids? I've missed them." The conversation that followed was painfully revealing. Not once did Robert ask how I'd been feeling, whether I was happy here, if I was making progress in therapy. Instead, he outlined increasingly elaborate plans for my future, all predicated on access to funds he knew nothing about. "We could convert the den into a great first-floor bedroom for you," he enthused. "Get one of those medical beds that adjusts. You'd be comfortable there." "That sounds expensive," I noted mildly. "Well, with Uncle Harold's help, He smiled, as if we shared a private joke about a man he'd never met. When Robert finally left, promising to return tomorrow with Lisa to discuss options, I exhaled a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. My son, my only child, had revealed himself more completely in the past hour than in all the months I'd been at Sunset. Diana found me staring out the window an hour later. "That bad?" she asked, checking my evening medications. "Worse," I admitted. "Diana, do you know anything about elder rights, legal protections?" She hesitated. "Some. My grandmother had similar issues with family after her stroke. Would you help me research something? I need information about financial protections, healthcare proxies, power of attorney." Diana's expression grew serious. "Mrs. Sullivan, are you worried about your son's intentions? Let's just say I need to understand my options before making any decisions." She nodded slowly. "I can help, but you should know this could get complicated." I thought about Robert's sudden interest in my care, his immediate plans for my money, his failure to even ask if I was happy. "It's already complicated," I replied. "I just need to make sure I'm not outmaneuvered again." That evening, I called Mr. Winters back, requesting a private meeting. We agreed he would visit in 2 days, officially to discuss routine paperwork. As I prepared for bed, my tablet pinged with an incoming email. It was from Robert, with floor plans for a mother-in-law suite addition to his house, already priced out at $175,000. He'd moved remarkably quickly for someone who'd had no time to visit his mother for weeks. I added to my digital journal. Robert visited immediately after hearing about potential inheritance. Never asked about my health, happiness, or progress. Already planning expensive renovations to his home. Treating Harold's money as if it's already his to spend. I need to protect myself. Not just my new financial resources, but my autonomy. My right to determine my own future. Harold's gift isn't just money. It's the chance to reclaim control of my life. To ensure I'm never again at the mercy of someone else's budget for my care. The realization settled over me like armor. For too long, I'd been a supporting character in my own life story. First as John's wife, then as Robert's mother, finally as Sunset's patient in room 157. It was time to become the protagonist again. The Hillcrest Assisted Living Community offers premium services for discerning seniors, the brochure in my lap proclaimed. Glossy photos showed smiling elderly residents engaged in watercolor classes and Tai Chi. 1 month after Robert learned of my inheritance, I found myself relocated to this upscale facility, not Robert's house as initially offered, but a place conveniently located just 10 minutes from his suburban home. "Isn't this better, Mom?" Robert gestured around my new private suite, with its tasteful decor and large windows overlooking manicured gardens. "The care here is top-notch." It was undeniably better than Sunset. The staff-to-patient ratio alone meant I rarely waited for assistance. The food was palatable, the physical therapy equipment state-of-the-art. But the sudden upgrade only underscored the inadequacy of what Robert had deemed sufficient before the prospect of inheritance money. "It's very nice," I acknowledged, "though I'm curious why you decided against having me stay with you, as you originally suggested." Robert's smile tightened imperceptibly. "The contractor said the renovations would take months. This is better for now, while we navigate the inheritance process." The inheritance process. That convenient phrase that justified anything and everything in Robert's mind. "Speaking of which," he continued, pulling papers from his briefcase, "I've been talking with my financial advisor about the best way to manage Uncle Harold's estate once it transfers. We should set up joint accounts to simplify things." I glanced at the document's power of attorney forms, joint banking authorizations, healthcare directives naming Robert as my decision-maker. "These look complicated," I said mildly. "I'll need to review them carefully." "It's all standard stuff, Mom. Just makes it easier for me to handle things for you." I placed the papers aside. I've always been thorough with legal matters. "Robert, you know that. I taught contract law in the English department. Remember?" His expression flickered between frustration and forced patience. "Of course. Take your time. But the sooner we get this settled, the sooner we can access the funds. As if Harold's bequest was a family windfall rather than my inheritance. After Robert left, I examined my new surroundings more critically. Yes, Hillcrest was luxurious compared to Sunset, but it was still an institution, still a place where my life would be regulated by others, still not home. My thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. "Mrs. Sullivan? I'm Nancy Garcia. Your care coordinator. The young woman who entered had a direct gaze and confident manner. Robert had hired her to visit 3 times weekly as a personal care assistant, another upgrade that hadn't been possible before Uncle Harold. Your son mentioned you might need help settling in, Nancy continued, and that you're recovering from a stroke. 8 months ago, I confirmed. Left side mobility issues, though I'm improving with therapy. Nancy nodded professionally. I've reviewed your medical records. Your progress is impressive for someone your age. For someone my age, I repeated dryly. Is that clinical language for not completely hopeless? Unexpectedly, Nancy laughed. It's clinical language for you're working harder than most patients half your age. I admired determination, Mrs. Sullivan. Something about her directness appealed to me. Call me Margaret, and thank you for not treating me like I'm made of glass or suffering from dementia. The stroke affected my body, not my mind. That's clear from your records. You've been advocating for more intensive therapy from the beginning. We spent the next hour reviewing my daily routine and needs. Nancy asked insightful questions about my preferences and goals, the first healthcare provider who'd bothered to do so since my stroke. One last thing, Nancy said as she prepared to leave. I'm finishing my master's in gerontology at Georgetown. My focus is elder advocacy and rights, just so you know my background. The coincidence seemed too perfect. Did my son know this when he hired you? No, Nancy replied. The agency assigned me based on scheduling. Why? I considered whether to trust this stranger with my concerns, but something in her professional demeanor gave me confidence. Just curious, I said. Though I'd be interested in hearing more about your studies sometime, perhaps at our next meeting. 2 weeks later, Robert and Lisa invited me to dinner at their home, the first such invitation since my stroke. Lisa seemed genuinely pleased to see me, though her strained smiles whenever Robert mentioned Mom's inheritance told their own story. As Robert helped me back to the car afterward, I noticed mail on the console, a bank notice marked Urgent Final Foreclosure Warning, and a credit card statement with Payment Overdue stamped in red. Everything okay with the business, Robert? I asked casually. He shoved the papers under a folder. Just typical cash flow challenges. Nothing serious, but his tight expression and the way his hands gripped the steering wheel suggested otherwise. That night in my new apartment at Hillcrest, I made 2 important calls. One to Mr. Winters to discuss creating a trust for my inheritance, and another to Diana at Sunset, offering to help her find a position at Hillcrest. Both conversations confirmed what I was beginning to suspect. Robert's financial situation was far more precarious than he'd admitted, and his sudden attentiveness had everything to do with accessing Harold's money. As I updated my digital journal, I added a new note. Robert's business may be failing. His lifestyle, the new car, the vacations, the house appears to be built on debt. He sees Harold's bequest as his salvation, not my security. I need to protect myself without alienating him completely. A balance between caution and compassion. But as I switched off my tablet, I wondered if that balance was even possible. The son I thought I knew, the boy I'd sacrificed for, the man I'd trusted with my future, seemed increasingly like a stranger. And strangers couldn't be trusted with $8 million, or with my remaining years. Mrs. Sullivan, we have a few options for structuring the trust. James Winters spread documents across the conference table in his downtown office. The doctor's appointment I'd asked Nancy to drive me to was actually this crucial meeting, 3 months after learning of my inheritance. Nancy sat quietly in the corner, her presence both practical, I still needed assistance with mobility, and strategic as a witness to my clear mental capacity. The irrevocable trust gives you the strongest protection, Mr. Winters continued. Once established, these assets can't be touched by creditors or manipulated by anyone trying to influence you. His diplomatic phrasing made me smile faintly. You mean my son? Mr. Winters adjusted his glasses. I've seen family dynamics change when significant assets enter the picture. The arrangement you described, your care facility upgrades, coinciding with your son's knowledge of the inheritance. His sudden interest in joint accounts follows a concerning pattern. How long would establishing this trust take? I asked, running my fingers along the document's edge. 6 to 8 months for complete implementation. We'd need to transfer assets gradually, establish the trust framework, name trustees. And in the meantime, we maintain the appearance of processing the inheritance. Your nephew, son, I corrected automatically. Forgive me. Your son need not know the full value or the protective measures being implemented. I nodded, considering the chess game ahead. Robert's growing impatient. He's brought paperwork for me to sign 3 times now, which you've wisely declined. Mr. Winters leaned forward. Mrs. Sullivan, I must ask, what are your long-term intentions regarding your son? The question caught me off guard. What do you mean? Do you intend to provide financial support to him eventually? Is reconciliation a goal? Or is your priority simply protecting your assets for your care and perhaps other beneficiaries? I stared out the window at the city skyline, considering the complexity of maternal love colliding with self-preservation. I don't want to punish Robert, I said finally, but I can't trust him with control over my life or finances. Not anymore. Mr. Winters nodded. Then I suggest a 2-pronged approach. First, the irrevocable trust for the bulk of the inheritance, with yourself as primary beneficiary and a professional trustee managing disbursements. Second, a smaller immediate distribution, perhaps $50,000, as a gesture of goodwill to your son. A distraction, I translated. A strategic concession, he corrected, with the ghost of a smile. It provides immediate relief for his financial pressures while buying time for the larger protective measures. On the drive back to Hillcrest, Nancy remained thoughtfully silent until we were halfway there. You're very brave, she said finally. Brave? Or just finally being sensible? Both. Nancy navigated through traffic with practiced ease. Many people in your position would simply give in. Family pressure is powerful, especially when you're physically vulnerable. I thought about the mounting pressure from Robert, his increasingly frequent visits always circling back to the inheritance, his not-so-subtle comments about how his business troubles could be solved once this estate business is settled. I've already given in once, I replied. I sold my home to help Robert's business after his father died. He promised to take care of me when I needed it. You've seen how that promise was kept. Nancy nodded. The Sunset Care Home, the cheapest facility he could find, where I waited hours for basic assistance, where he visited less and less frequently, always too busy to stay more than 20 minutes. I gazed out the window. I won't make the same mistake again. This inheritance isn't just money, it's the freedom to determine my own future. Back at Hillcrest, I found Diana now employed as an activities coordinator thanks to my recommendation, waiting with news. Your son called the administration office, she said quietly. He was asking questions about whether you really need the private room and additional physical therapy sessions. Said they seemed excessive given your condition. The familiar pattern emerged again, Robert's concern for my care directly proportional to its cost to him. Thank you for telling me, I said, adding this to my mental file. That evening, Robert called, his voice uncharacteristically cheerful. Great news, Mom. I spoke with Uncle Harold's lawyer today. He says they can release some funds while the estate processes. I'm thinking we could use it to finally get you set up at home with us. You spoke with Mr. Winters? I asked, alarmed that Robert had contacted my attorney directly. Well, I left a message. His assistant said he'd call back. Robert paused. Mom, these delays are getting ridiculous. It's been months. We need to be more proactive about moving things along. We, always we. Actually, Robert, I said carefully, Mr. Winters mentioned the possibility of an advanced distribution. Nothing major, but perhaps enough to address some immediate concerns. His tone shifted instantly. Really? That's excellent. How much are we talking about? $50,000. A pause. That's helpful, though given the total estate value. It's a start, I replied firmly. The rest will take time, Robert. Legal processes can't be rushed. After ending the call, I updated my digital journal, then sent a secure email to Mr. Winters authorizing the advance distribution to Robert. The money would likely disappear into his financial black hole, but it would buy me precious time to secure the remaining $7,950,000. Time to ensure my remaining years would be lived on my terms, not as a convenient solution to my son's financial problems. As I prepared for bed, assisted by an evening aide, I caught sight of my reflection in the bathroom mirror. The woman looking back at me was changed not just by the stroke that had weakened my left side, but by something in her eyes, a hardness that hadn't been there before, a clarity born of difficult truths. I hardly recognized her, yet somehow I felt I was finally seeing myself clearly for the first time in years. Excellent progress, Mrs. Sullivan. Dr. Chen, my new physical therapist at Hillcrest, noted approvingly as I completed the walking exercise with only my cane for support. "You've graduated from the walker entirely?" "For short distances," I confirmed, catching my breath. 6 months since the stroke, and each victory still came wrapped in the humbling package of limitations. I still need the wheelchair for anything longer than across my apartment. Nevertheless, most patients with similar strokes don't achieve this level of recovery, especially at my age, I finished wryly. I'm beginning to think that phrase should be banned from medical vocabulary. Chen smiled. I was going to say, especially with interrupted therapy cycles. Your records show inconsistent sessions at your previous facility. Sunset had staffing issues, I said diplomatically, not mentioning that Robert had opted for the bare minimum Medicare-covered therapy sessions, deeming anything additional unnecessary expenses. Nancy, watching from the corner, caught my eye. She knew the full story, having become my most trusted ally over the past 3 months at Hillcrest. Our professional relationship had evolved into something deeper, confidant, advocate, and increasingly, friend. Later, as Nancy helped me back to my apartment, she mentioned casually, "I have something to discuss when we're private." Once inside with the door closed, her expression turned serious. "I was at Sunset yesterday for a class observation. I overheard something concerning." My heart tightened. "About Robert?" She nodded. "He was meeting with the administrator, asking about their current rates and availability. He specifically inquired about transferring a patient from Hillcrest back to Sunset if circumstances changed." The implication was clear. Robert was exploring options to return me to the inadequate care I'd escaped, presumably once he secured control of my finances. "Did he see you?" I asked, my voice steady despite the cold anger settling in my chest. "No, I was in the records room next door." Nancy hesitated. "Margaret, I don't want to alarm you, but my son is planning contingencies in case his access to money doesn't materialize as he hopes." I finished her thought. "I'm not surprised, just disappointed." We were interrupted by a knock at the door. Nancy opened it to reveal a smiling Vanessa, my daughter-in-law, with my teenage grandchildren, Jason and Emma, behind her. "Surprise visit," Vanessa announced with forced brightness. "We thought you might enjoy some family time." This was new. In the 6 months since my stroke, Vanessa had visited exactly twice, both times briefly accompanying Robert. Now she stood in my doorway with homemade cookies and a FA-aid of familial devotion. Jason, 16 and gangly, gave me a genuine hug. "Hey, Grandma, Dad said we should visit more often." "Did he now?" I raised an eyebrow at my grandson, who caught my skepticism with a perceptive glance. Emma, 14, and already developing her mother's social polish, began chattering about school while arranging cookies on a plate. Vanessa made a show of straightening my already neat apartment while peppering me with questions about my comfort. Their performance was transparent but telling. Robert had clearly enlisted his family in his campaign to secure my goodwill and, by extension, my inheritance. During lunch, Vanessa casually mentioned, "We've been looking at houses in Oak Ridge Heights. Such a beautiful neighborhood, but the prices are astronomical. Wouldn't that be a significantly more expensive area than where you are now?" I asked innocently. She nodded enthusiastically. "Oh, absolutely. We could never afford it normally, but Robert says our financial situation might be changing soon." From the corner of my eye, I caught Jason's uncomfortable expression. When Vanessa took Emma to fetch dessert from the car, Jason leaned close to me. "Dad's been acting weird lately," he confided. "He and Mom keep having these intense conversations about money that stop when I walk in." "Financial matters can be stressful," I replied neutrally. "Last night I heard him tell Mom that all our money problems will be over soon, thanks to you." Jason's direct gaze held mine. "What did he mean by that, Grandma?" Before I could formulate a response, Vanessa and Emma returned with an elaborate cake decorated with "We love you, Grandma" in frosting. The remainder of their visit continued in this vein, a strange performance of family affection layered over transparent financial anticipation. When they finally left, promising to return soon, I felt emotionally drained. "Well, that was illuminating," Nancy remarked dryly. "Indeed." I sank into my armchair. Suddenly, I'm the beloved matriarch they can't visit enough. All it took was $8 million. Nancy sat opposite me. "What will you do about the information from Sunset?" I considered the question carefully. "Continue with our plan. The trust documents should be ready next month, correct?" According to Mr. Winters, yes, but establishing the trust is just the beginning. Transferring all assets will take months. Then we need to maintain the status quo until everything's secured. I tapped my cane thoughtfully against the floor. Robert received the advance distribution? Nancy nodded. 2 weeks ago, Mr. Winters confirmed the transfer completed. Good. That should keep him cooperative while we finalize the legal protections. I glanced at the family photos on my side table, snapshots of happier times when I believed in my son's love without question. I need to speak with Diana about what she's hearing at Hillcrest. If Robert's exploring moving me back to Sunset, he may be making inquiries here too. That evening, alone with my thoughts, I updated my digital journal with details of Vanessa's visit and Robert's actions at Sunset. The record had grown extensive, a detailed chronicle of manipulation that still ached to document, despite its necessity. As I wrote, I reflected on how my relationship with Robert had inverted. Once I had protected him, now I protected myself from him. Once I had sacrificed for his future, now I safeguarded my own. The betrayal still cut deep, but increasingly, my pain was hardening into resolve. The mother who had given everything was learning, finally, to keep something vital for herself, dignity and self-determination in my remaining years, whatever they might hold. I don't understand what's taking so long, Robert's voice escalated, echoing in my Hillcrest apartment. 9 months after my stroke, his patience was visibly fraying. The $50,000 advance had disappeared into his financial morass, and he'd returned for more, only to encounter my continued insistence on legal processes and estate complexities. These things take time, Robert, I repeated calmly, my hands steady on my cane. My recovery had progressed remarkably. I now walked short distances unassisted and managed most daily activities independently, though fatigue remained a constant companion. It's been months, Mom. How complicated can it be to transfer money from a dead uncle to his only living relative? His frustration bubbled over into sarcasm. Or is there something you're not telling me? I met his gaze directly. What exactly are you asking? Robert? He paced, running a hand through hair that had noticeably thinned since this saga began. I'm asking why you're dragging this out when you know we're counting on that money. The admission hung in the air between us, finally spoken aloud. Counting on what money exactly? I asked, my voice deceptively soft. Harold's bequest was to me, not to us. Robert froze, then recovered with a forced laugh. Of course it's yours, Mom. I just meant, we're family. We support each other, like I've been supporting you all these months. Supporting me? I echoed. 9 months of accumulated grievances threatening to overflow. By placing me in the cheapest care facility you could find? By visiting once a month for 20 minutes? By reducing my therapy sessions to save money while taking family vacations? His face flushed. That's not fair. We've been under financial pressure, which is apparently my responsibility to solve. I leaned forward. Tell me honestly, Robert, how much debt are you carrying? His expression confirmed what I'd suspected. That's not relevant. It's entirely relevant if you're planning your financial future around my inheritance. Robert's composure cracked further. You don't understand. The business is underwater. We're behind on the mortgage, and credit card companies are threatening collections. We could lose everything. And your solution is to spend your mother's inheritance rather than restructure your finances? I kept my voice level, though my heart raced. The inheritance meant to secure my care for whatever years I have left? We'd take care of you. You'd never want for anything. Like I never wanted for anything at Sunset? I challenged. Where I waited hours for basic assistance? Where my call button was routinely ignored? That was different. We didn't have resources, I finished. Because taking care of your mother properly wasn't a priority for your budget. But a new car was. Disney World was. Robert's expression darkened. Is that what this is about? Punishment? Some kind of revenge because you think I didn't visit enough? This is about recognizing that your financial decisions are your responsibility, not mine. I squared my shoulders. Harold's money is for my care and security. Robert, not for rescuing you from debt or buying you a larger house. You selfish. He caught himself, but not before I glimpsed the raw anger beneath his carefully maintained facade of filial concern. After everything I've done for you, what exactly have you done for me, Robert? I interrupted. A lifetime of deference finally giving way to direct confrontation. Sold my house to fund your business? Oh, wait, That was what I did for you. Promise to care for me when I needed it. A promise you fulfilled with the bare minimum of attention and resources. Robert stared at me as if seeing a stranger. If, perhaps he was. The stroke had changed me not just physically, but in my willingness to accommodate others at my own expense. You've changed, he said flatly. Yes, I agreed. I've finally recognized that my need for security and dignity in my final years matters just as much as your desire for a more luxurious lifestyle. So what happens now? His voice had turned cold. You keep the money for yourself? Leave your son and grandchildren struggling while you live in luxury? What happens now is that I ensure my own needs are met first. I held his gaze. Once the inheritance is properly structured for my security, we can discuss what, if anything, might be available to help you resolve your financial situation. If anything? He repeated incredulously. We're talking about $8 million. I remained silent, letting the full implications of my position sink in. Robert would no longer dictate the terms of my care or my finances. The power dynamic had shifted a reality he was only beginning to grasp. I can't believe this, he muttered, gathering his coat. My own mother, turning her back on her family. Is that what you think this is? I asked quietly. Or is it a mother finally refusing to be treated as nothing more than a financial resource? He left without answering, the door closing with controlled force behind him. I sat motionless for several minutes, processing the confrontation. 9 months ago, I would have capitulated instantly to Robert's needs, believing that maternal sacrifice was both virtue and obligation. Now I recognized it as the dangerous pattern that had left me vulnerable and discarded at sunset. My tablet pinged with a message from Nancy. Meeting with Mr. Winters confirmed for tomorrow. Trust documents ready for signature. I responded with a simple, proceeding as planned. Later that evening, my phone rang, Jason's number flashing on the screen. Grandma? His adolescent voice sounded troubled. Dad came home really upset today. He was yelling at Mom about you being unreasonable and ungrateful. I imagine he's feeling frustrated, I said carefully. He said something weird. Jason paused. He said maybe they should talk to a lawyer about your mental capacity. What does that mean? A chill ran through me. It means your father is considering legal options to challenge my ability to make my own decisions. That's messed up, Jason said with teenage bluntness. You're smarter than all of us put together. Despite everything, I smiled. Thank you, Jason. But please be careful not to get caught in the middle of this situation. Too late, he replied with surprising maturity. Dad doesn't know I'm calling you. I wanted to make sure you're okay. His concern genuine in a way his parents' performative attention had never been touched me deeply. I'm okay, Jason. Better than okay. I'm finally standing up for myself. After we hung up, I added Jason's warning to my digital journal, then emailed Mr. Winters about Robert's potential legal challenge. The pieces were moving faster now, the confrontation escalating beyond words to potential actions. I was no longer the compliant, grateful mother accepting whatever scraps of attention and care Robert deigned to provide. I had become something more dangerous to his plans, a woman with resources, clarity, and resolve. The transformation had begun with Harold's unexpected bequest, but it had been completed by Robert's own actions, his transparent greed, his willing abandonment when my care proved inconvenient, his assumption that my inheritance was his to claim. The mother he remembered wouldn't fight back, but stroke or no stroke, that woman no longer existed. Jason found these on Robert's computer. Nancy spread the printed documents across my kitchen table. He used his father's laptop for homework and accidentally discovered them in an open folder. 11 months after my stroke, the situation with Robert had evolved from tense standoff to active opposition. Jason, increasingly uncomfortable with his father's behavior, had become an unexpected ally, keeping me informed of Robert's private discussions and plans. I examined the papers carefully, emails between Robert and a law firm specializing in guardianship cases, inquiries about having a parent declared mentally incompetent, and notes outlining a strategy to challenge my capacity to manage financial matters. He's really going through with it, I murmured, more saddened than shocked. The final bridge between us was burning, and Robert had lit the match. There's more, Nancy said grimly. Diana overheard him speaking with Dr. Brennan, asking whether your stroke might have affected your judgment or reasoning abilities. Dr. Brennan was the Hillcrest medical director, a competent physician who had always treated me with professional respect. What did Brennan say? According to Diana, he was non-committal but uncomfortable, said he'd need to review your case formally if Robert was requesting an official capacity evaluation. I nodded thoughtfully. Robert's getting desperate. The trust is established, the assets are transferring gradually, and his financial situation isn't improving. Nancy glanced at the documents again. These reference having you evaluated by a neuropsychologist of his choosing, someone named Dr. Feldman. Convenient, I remarked dryly. I assume this Dr. Feldman specializes in finding elderly patients incompetent? We should accelerate our countermeasures, Nancy advised. If Robert files for guardianship, it could freeze your assets temporarily while the court evaluates the claim. I had anticipated this possibility. With Mr. Winter's guidance, we'd prepared extensively over the past months, building a comprehensive record of my mental acuity and decision-making capacity. But Robert's aggressive timeline required adjustments to our strategy. Call Mr. Winters, I instructed. Tell him we need to move forward with the independent neuropsychological evaluation immediately, not next month as planned. Nancy nodded, already dialing. What about Hillcrest? If Robert's speaking with Dr. Brennan, we need to ensure the administration understands the situation. I considered the relationships I'd carefully cultivated during my time here. Schedule a meeting with Director Patel. I want to explain what's happening before Robert can control the narrative. The following week became a carefully choreographed defense operation. Dr. Williamson, a respected neuropsychologist with expertise in post-stroke cognition, conducted an exhaustive evaluation of my mental capacity, documenting his findings in a detailed report that confirmed what we already knew. My cognitive abilities remained fully intact despite the physical limitations from the stroke. Director Patel, when briefed on the situation, was professionally neutral but practically supportive. We evaluate residents based on our own observations, Mrs. Sullivan, not family claims. Our records indicate no cognitive concerns whatsoever in your case. Mr. Winters filed the capacity evaluation with the court preemptively, establishing a legal record before Robert could make his move. He also accelerated the remaining asset transfers to the irrevocable trust, though some would still take months to complete. Throughout this flurry of activity, I maintained my daily routine, physical therapy, social activities, weekly calls with Eleanor from Sunset, now relocated to a better facility thanks to my private financial assistance, and regular visits from Jason and occasionally Emma, who came independently of their parents. Dad's been meeting with lawyers almost every day, Jason reported during one visit. Mom's getting worried about the money he's spending on legal fees. How are things at home? I asked, concerned about the impact on my grandchildren. Jason shrugged with teenage-affected nonchalance that didn't quite mask his discomfort. Tense. They argue a lot about money. Dad keeps saying everything will be different once they resolve the situation with Grandma. The casual way my son had reduced me to a situation to be resolved still had the power to wound, despite everything. Jason, I said carefully, I hope you understand that this conflict isn't about you or Emma. I love you both very much. He nodded, surprising me with sudden maturity. I know. Dad's the one making it weird. He hesitated. Grandma, what's going to happen? Is Dad really trying to take control of your money? I considered how to explain the situation without demonizing his father. Your dad is facing financial difficulties. He sees my inheritance as a solution to those problems. I see it differently as security for my care and future. So he wants to take your money to fix his problems? Jason frowned. That doesn't seem right. People under financial pressure sometimes make choices they wouldn't otherwise make, I said diplomatically, though my private thoughts were far less charitable. 2 days later, the other shoe dropped. A court courier delivered formal papers Robert had filed for guardianship, claiming I was mentally incapacitated and vulnerable to undue influence from my caretakers and legal representatives. The documents painted a distorted portrait. Margaret Sullivan, once vibrant and independent, now confused and manipulated after a devastating stroke, a mother being taken advantage of by opportunistic staff and lawyers, a woman who needed protection specifically, her son's protection from her own impaired judgment. Mr. Winters arrived within hours of my call, his normally composed demeanor showing traces of genuine indignation. This petition is offensive, he declared, reviewing the filing. The claims about your mental state directly contradict Dr. Williamson's evaluation and Hillcrest's records. Robert's desperate, I said simply. The $50,000 is gone. His financial situation is worsening, and I've made it clear I won't be his personal bailout. We'll fight this, Mr. Winters assured me. We've prepared thoroughly, but you should know these proceedings can become invasive and emotionally draining. I nodded, a strange calm settling over me. I've had 11 months to prepare for this moment, James, since the day I discovered Robert had placed me in Sunset while telling me it was the best he could afford. That evening, alone in my apartment, I updated my digital journal with the latest developments. What had begun as a private record of neglect had evolved into a comprehensive chronology that would now serve as evidence in court. I paused, fingers hovering over the tablet's screen, as the full circle of events struck me. My stroke had revealed Robert's true character. Harold's bequest had given me the means to protect myself, and now Robert's own actions would expose his motivations to legal scrutiny. There was a certain justice in that symmetry, though it brought no joy, only a weary determination to see this through to its conclusion, whatever that might be. The court calls Margaret Sullivan. 14 months after my stroke, I rose steadily from my seat, my cane a prop rather than a necessity now. The courtroom felt oppressively formal, all polished wood and hushed voices, the setting for the final act in a drama I never wanted to participate in. Robert sat at the plaintiff's table, impeccably dressed but noticeably thinner, the strain of recent months evident in his posture. His attorney, an aggressively confident woman named Charlotte Benson, had spent the morning painting me as a confused, manipulated elderly woman whose stroke had compromised her judgment. Now it was my turn to speak. I made my way to the witness stand without assistance, a deliberate choice to demonstrate my improved physical condition. As I settled into the chair, I caught Jason's eye in the gallery. He sat beside Vanessa, who looked uncomfortable with the entire proceeding. Emma had been deemed too young to attend. Mrs. Sullivan, Judge Harris began, do you understand why we're here today? Perfectly, Your Honor, I replied clearly. My son believes I am mentally incapacitated and unable to manage my affairs, particularly regarding an inheritance I received. I am here to demonstrate otherwise. For the next hour, I answered questions from both attorneys with composed precision. My background as a literature professor served me well. I was accustomed to articulating complex ideas and responding to challenges. Mr. Winters led me through a methodical recounting of the past 14 months, my care at Sunset, the discovery of Harold's bequest, Robert's sudden change in attentiveness, and my decisions regarding the inheritance. Why did you establish the trust without consulting your son? Mr. Winters asked. Because Robert made it clear he viewed the inheritance as a solution to his financial problems, not as security for my ongoing care, I explained. When I suggested the money was primarily for my needs, he became angry and complained that I was being selfish. When Ms. Benson's turn came, her approach was immediately combative. Mrs. Sullivan, isn't it true that you've developed an unusual dependence on your hired caregiver, Nancy Garcia? I've developed a professional relationship with Nancy, who has provided excellent care, I corrected. But I make my own decisions. And yet Ms. Garcia accompanies you to legal meetings, medical appointments, even this courtroom today. Her implication was clear. Nancy was manipulating me for financial gain. Ms. Garcia assists with my physical needs, I replied evenly. My mind works perfectly well without assistance. The questioning continued in this vein, with Ms. Benson attempting to paint everyday memory lapses as cognitive decline and my independence as stubbornness. When she suggested that my paranoia about Robert's intentions was a symptom of post-stroke dementia, I finally allowed my frustration to show. Ms. Benson, I have maintained a detailed record of my son's behavior since my stroke. I held up my tablet. Would you like me to read his exact words when he discovered I had received an inheritance? Or perhaps the comments he made about moving me back to Sunset Care Home once he had control of my finances? The judge intervened before she could respond. Mrs. Sullivan, are you suggesting your son's petition is financially motivated? I met Robert's gaze directly for the first time that day. I believe my son is in significant financial distress and sees my inheritance as his solution rather than my security. His concern for my mental capacity coincidentally emerged only after I refused to use the funds to resolve his debts. Ms. Benson attempted to redirect, Mrs. Sullivan, you've experienced a life-altering medical event. Isn't it possible that your perception of your son's intentions has been affected by the emotional trauma of your stroke? It's my body that was damaged, counselor, not my capacity to recognize exploitation. My voice remained steady. I taught critical thinking to college students for 40 years. Those skills didn't disappear with my mobility. The climactic moment came when Ms. Benson tried to demonstrate Robert's long-standing concern for my welfare. Mr. Sullivan, she asked Robert on redirect, approximately how much have you spent on your mother's care since her stroke? Robert cleared his throat. Around $8,000 monthly at Sunset, plus additional medical expenses. It was a significant financial strain, but her care was my priority. Mr. Winters rose immediately. Your Honor, I'd like to introduce Exhibit 27, the actual billing records from Sunset Care Home. The documents were displayed on the courtroom screen. $3,200 monthly for the basic care package, with Medicare covering the majority of therapy costs, less than half what Robert had claimed. Mr. Sullivan, Mr. Winters asked with deliberate calm, can you explain the discrepancy between your testimony and these official records? Robert flushed. I was including other expenses, transportation, items I brought her, itemized receipts for these expenses? I didn't keep detailed records, Robert admitted, his confident facade crumbling. The judge's expression hardened almost imperceptibly. Mr. Sullivan, did you inform your mother that you had selected the minimum care package at Sunset while representing to her that you were providing the best care possible? Robert's silence was damning. When all testimony concluded, Judge Harris took only a brief recess before delivering her ruling. Her words were measured, but unmistakably firm. The court finds no evidence supporting the petition for guardianship. Mrs. Sullivan has demonstrated clear cognitive capacity and appropriate decision-making ability. Furthermore, the court finds the timing and nature of this petition troubling. She turned to Robert directly. Mr. Sullivan, the evidence suggests your motivation in seeking guardianship was primarily financial rather than concern for your mother's welfare. This court will not enable such exploitation. The guardianship petition was denied. Additional protective orders were put in place to prevent further legal challenges without substantial new evidence. As we left the courtroom, I found myself face to face with Robert in the hallway. His expression was a complex mixture of anger, embarrassment, and something that might have been shame. You won, he said flatly. I hope you're satisfied. This wasn't about winning, Robert, I replied softly. It was about protecting myself when you wouldn't. He turned away without responding, leaving me standing with Nancy, Mr. Winters, and the hollow victory of having publicly exposed my only child's attempt to take control of my life for his financial benefit. Jason approached cautiously. Grandma, are you okay? I embraced him, grateful for his uninvolved concern. I will be. What happens now? He asked. Now, I said, finding strength in the certainty of my path forward. I rebuild, on my terms. As we left the courthouse, reporters approached for statements about the elderly professor who fought back. I declined to comment, but the headline would appear anyway. Stroke survivor defeats son's guardianship attempt, retains control of multi-million-dollar inheritance. A public victory, a private heartbreak, and the beginning of whatever came next. Your new place looks amazing, Grandma. Jason wandered around my condominium, admiring the adaptations that made independent living possible despite my lingering physical limitations. 22 months after my stroke, I'd made the transition from Hillcrest to my own home, a ground-floor unit in a luxury building with 24-hour security and on-site medical assistance if needed. It feels like freedom, I admitted, watching him examine the collection of books I'd carefully curated for my new library. Having my own space again after nearly 2 years in institutions. And you can manage everything on your own? His teenage face showed genuine concern rather than the performative worry his father had perfected. Not everything, I acknowledged honestly. Nancy still comes 3 times weekly to help with certain tasks. Diana handles my administrative needs, but I can make my own breakfast, dress myself, and most importantly, make my own decisions. Jason nodded, his eyes drifting to the framed family photos on my mantel. Robert's image appeared in several younger, smiling, the son I'd believed in completely. Jason touched one frame cautiously. Have you heard from Dad? Not directly, I admitted. Not since the court hearing 4 months ago. The silence between us acknowledged the painful reality. Robert's humiliation in court had severed whatever remained of our relationship. His financial situation had deteriorated further, the business finally failing. The house sold to cover debts. Vanessa had filed for divorce, unwilling to sink further into his financial chaos. He's living in an apartment now, Jason offered. Mom got the house in the separation agreement, but she's talking about selling it. Too many memories, she says. I nodded, unsurprised. And how are you handling everything? Jason shrugged with forced casualness. It's weird. Dad talks about you differently now. Not angry anymore, just sad. Something tightened in my chest, a mother's instinctive pain at her child's suffering, despite everything. And what does he say? Not much. Not just that he messed up, that he didn't understand what was happening until it was too late. Jason hesitated. He stopped blaming you, if that matters. It did matter, though I wasn't sure why. Robert's actions had made our estrangement inevitable. Yet some part of me, the part that had watched him take his first steps, had bandaged, scraped knees, had celebrated his triumphs, still ached for reconciliation, however improbable. Would you see him? Jason asked suddenly. If he wanted to talk? The question lingered between us, weighty with implications. I don't know, I answered truthfully. A lot has happened. Jason nodded, respecting my honesty. Before leaving, he hugged me tightly, no longer the awkward teenager, but a young man on the cusp of adulthood, trying to navigate the fractured landscape of his family. That evening, I sat on my private balcony, watching the sunset paint the sky in dramatic oranges and purples. My life had found a new equilibrium, comfortable, dignified, secure. The Blackwood Foundation for Dignity in Aging was operational, already making small but meaningful improvements in elder care facilities across the state. Eleanor had become a friend and collaborator in these efforts, her first-hand experience informing our advocacy work. Harold's unexpected bequest had transformed my remaining years from a slow decline in neglectful institutions to purposeful independence. A gift not just of financial security, but of agency, the ability to shape whatever time I had left on my own terms. My musings were interrupted by a call from Nancy. Margaret, Robert Sullivan is in the lobby. He's asking if you'll see him. My heart stuttered. Did he say why? Just that he needs to speak with you. Do you want me to come over? I considered the question carefully. No, but stay on standby, please. After ending the call, I sat motionless, weighing my options. I could refuse to see him, a boundary I had every right to establish after his attempts to seize control of my life. Or I could listen, knowing that whatever healing might be possible would require this difficult first step. Send him up, I told the concierge finally. 20 minutes later, a knock at my door announced his arrival. When I opened it, I barely recognized the man standing before me. Robert had aged years in months, hair now significantly gray, posture diminished, designer clothes replaced by department store basics. Mom, he said simply, his voice catching. Robert. I stepped aside, allowing him to enter without embracing him. He moved tentatively into my living room, taking in the tasteful furnishings, the evidence of my comfortable independence. Your place is nice, he offered awkwardly. Thank you. I indicated the sofa. Would you like to sit? We settled into an uncomfortable silence, 22 months of conflict and betrayal hanging between us. I waited, unwilling to make this easier for him. Whatever he had come to say, he would need to find the words himself. I lost everything, he said finally. The business, the house, my marriage, everything except the kids, though I only see them on weekends now. I nodded without commenting. These were consequences of his own actions, not misfortunes to be pitied. For a long time, I blamed you, he continued, staring at his hands. Told myself if you'd just helped when I needed it, none of this would have happened. That you chose money over your own son. I remained silent, letting him work through his practiced speech. But that wasn't true. He looked up, meeting my eyes directly for the first time. I chose money over my own mother. I put you in that terrible place because it was cheap. I visited less and less because it was easier than seeing what I'd done. And when Uncle Harold's money appeared, I saw it as my salvation without ever considering what you needed. His voice cracked. I failed you completely, Mom. Before the stroke, after it, every step of the way. The raw honesty was unexpected. I had prepared for excuses, for subtle manipulations, for implied requests for financial help. not for this unvarnished acknowledgement. "Why are you here, Robert?" I asked quietly. "Not for money," he said quickly. "I know that's gone the trust, the foundation. I've accepted that. Then what?" He exhaled slowly. "Forgiveness, I guess, though I'm not sure I deserve it." The simplicity of his answer caught me off guard. Not reconciliation, not restoration, just forgiveness, the acknowledgement that what he had done was wrong. "Forgiveness isn't something granted on demand," I said carefully. "It's earned through actions, not words." "I know," he nodded. "I'm not asking for it today. I'm asking if there's a path to it at all, any way back from what I've done." The question hung between us, the adult son asking his mother if their relationship could ever heal, the mother wondering if forgiveness was wise or merely another form of self-abandonment. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "Trust, once broken, is difficult to rebuild, but not impossible." A fragile hope colored his question. I considered my response carefully. The foundation is doing important work, advocating for better elder care standards. They always need volunteers. He blinked, processing my indirect answer. "You want me to volunteer with your foundation? If you're sincere about making amends, about understanding what happened, that would be a place to start." I met his gaze steadily. "Actions, Robert, not promises." He nodded slowly. "I can do that." "It's not a guarantee of reconciliation," I cautioned. "Just a possibility." "A possibility is more than I had this morning," he said quietly. As he prepared to leave, he paused at the door. "Mom, I know it doesn't change anything, but I am sorry, truly sorry." "I believe you are," I replied. "Whether that's enough remains to be seen." After he left, I returned to my balcony, watching as the last traces of sunset faded into twilight. The encounter had left me emotionally exhausted, but strangely peaceful. Robert's apology wouldn't erase the past 2 years, but it had acknowledged a truth I needed to hear. The fault had been his, not mine. Whatever came next, whether tentative reconciliation or permanent separation, would be my choice. Not obligation, not manipulation, not guilt. My choice, freely made from a position of security and strength. Harold's financial gift had made this possible, but the true inheritance had been something far more valuable. The recognition of my own worth, independent of what I gave to others. The understanding that my needs mattered just as much as those of the people I loved. As darkness settled over the city, I opened my tablet and made a final entry in the digital journal that had chronicled my journey from abandonment to autonomy. Robert came today, not for money, but for forgiveness. I don't know if reconciliation is possible, but for the first time, the choice is truly mine. Not because I hold the financial power now, but because I finally understand that my dignity is non-negotiable. That is Harold's true gift to me, and perhaps, eventually, mine to Robert. And this concludes the inaugural grant cycle of the Blackwood Foundation for Dignity in Aging. I tapped the gavel lightly, smiling at the board members assembled around the conference table. Congratulations to everyone. 8 facilities will receive funding for staff training improvements, and 3 advocacy organizations will expand their outreach programs. Eleanor, serving as our resident advocate, beamed with satisfaction. At 77, she had found an unexpected second career as the Foundation's most persuasive spokesperson, her personal experience lending authenticity to our mission. "Margaret, would you like to say a few words before we adjourn?" James Winters asked. He had transitioned from my attorney to the Foundation's legal counsel, bringing his expertise in elder protection to our work. I glanced around the table at the faces who had become my community over the past 2 years. Nancy, now the Foundation's program director after completing her gerontology degree, Diana, our outreach coordinator, Jason, interning during his first year at Georgetown, where he studied pre-law with a focus on elder advocacy, and in the corner, quietly taking notes, Robert. 24 months after my stroke, life had found a new pattern, not the one I'd expected when I was first wheeled into Sunset Care Home, certainly not the one I'd planned when I sold my house to help Robert's business, but one built on my own terms. "Just a brief reflection," I said, rising with the aid of my cane, though I used it more from caution than necessity now. My recovery had plateaued at about 80% of my pre-stroke function, enough for independent living with occasional assistance, enough for purpose and dignity. 2 years ago, I found myself in a situation many elderly Americans experience: physically vulnerable, financially dependent, and increasingly invisible to the people who should have protected me. My gaze didn't linger on Robert, but he shifted uncomfortably nonetheless. Harold Blackwood's bequest changed my personal circumstances dramatically, but millions of aging Americans have no wealthy uncle waiting in the wings. What they deserve, what we all deserve, is a system that recognizes elder care as a matter of dignity, not convenience. Murmurs of agreement circled the table. In 6 months, we've already documented significant improvements in patient experiences at the facilities receiving our grants. Staff turnover has decreased by 20%. Resident satisfaction metrics have improved across the board. I smiled at Eleanor, and our resident advocates have ensured that the changes reflect actual needs, not just administrative assumptions. After the meeting adjourned, I gathered my papers slowly, watching as board members filtered out. Robert remained behind, his position as a volunteer coordinator still awkward but increasingly valuable to our work. "The Sunset Care Home Inspection Report," he said, placing a folder before me. "Their new administration has implemented all our recommended changes. The difference from 18 months ago is remarkable." I nodded, remembering the institutional indifference that had characterized my time there. "And the staff training program?" "Fully subscribed. Diana's curriculum on dignity-centered care has been particularly effective." He hesitated. "We've had requests to expand to 3 additional facilities. Draft a proposal for the next board meeting," I suggested. "If the metrics support expansion, we'll consider it." Our interactions remained professional, our personal relationships slowly healing through the shared work rather than direct confrontation. Robert had begun volunteering 8 months ago, initially stuffing envelopes and answering phones, menial tasks that he approached with unexpected humility. His financial situation had stabilized, though not recovered. A modest apartment, a used car, a new job in sales rather than business ownership. Weekend visits with Jason and Emma, who had chosen to live primarily with Vanessa after the divorce. "Jason mentioned you're coming to his debate tournament next week," Robert said, gathering his materials. "I wouldn't miss it. His team is favored to win regionals." An awkward pause followed the conversational rhythm between mother and son, still finding its way after so much damage. "Mom," Robert began tentatively, "I was wondering if you might want to have dinner afterward. The 4 of us, you, me, Jason, and Emma." The invitation represented a step forward in our cautious rebuilding a family dinner, something that hadn't occurred since before the guardianship hearing. "I'd like that," I said simply. His relief was visible. "Great, I'll make reservations." After he left, I finished my paperwork before calling my car service. My condominium was only 15 minutes from the foundation's offices, close enough for convenience, but separate enough to maintain boundaries between my professional and personal life. As the car navigated through afternoon traffic, I reflected on the journey of the past 2 years. The stroke that had nearly killed me had ultimately forced me to truly live to recognize my own worth, to establish boundaries, to build a life centered on my needs rather than others' expectations. At home, I settled into my favorite chair by the window, the one positioned perfectly to catch the afternoon light for reading. My tablet contained dozens of books I'd been meaning to explore. My calendar noted upcoming symphony performances and gallery exhibitions, and my kitchen held ingredients for the dinner I planned to prepare for Eleanor tomorrow. The phone rang, Emma calling to discuss her upcoming science fair project. At 15, she had developed an interest in healthcare technology, inspired partly by witnessing my recovery process. "I'm designing a modified mobility aid," she explained excitedly. "Something between a cane and a walker, but with sensors that can detect balance issues and provide support before a fall happens." "That sounds remarkable," I encouraged. "Have you considered the user interface? Many elderly people struggle with complex technology." We discussed her project in detail, her brilliant young mind already considering angles I hadn't thought of. When she finished describing her design, she hesitated. "Grandma, can I ask you something personal?" "Of course. Are you happy with everything that's happened, with how things are now?" The question was startlingly direct, yet perfectly emblematic of teenage perception cutting through adult pretense. "I'm content," I answered thoughtfully. "Happy in some ways, still healing in others. But I'm living authentically now, and that brings its own satisfaction." "Dad says you saved him by making him face consequences," she said quietly. that he was spiraling before everything happened. I hadn't expected this perspective from Robert. Did he really say that? Yeah. He says he lost what he thought he wanted but found what he actually needed. Emma's voice carried the slight embarrassment of discussing parental introspection. It sounds kind of cheesy when he says it. I smiled. Growth often sounds cheesy when described out loud. After we hung up, I moved to my balcony to enjoy the early evening air. My life now bore little resemblance to what I had envisioned when I first retired from teaching the modest house I'd sold. The quiet days of reading and occasional visits from family, the gradual winding down I'd anticipated. Instead, at 70, I had found unexpected purpose, not just in the foundation's work, but in my own reclamation of dignity and agency. The stroke that had been meant to diminish me had ultimately expanded my understanding of what I deserved from life and relationships. Harold's money had provided the means, but the transformation had required my own resolve, the decision to value myself as highly as I had always valued others. As twilight settled over the city, I opened my tablet one last time to add a final entry to the digital journal that had chronicled my journey, 24 months since the stroke that changed everything. I started this journal to document betrayal and abandonment. I end it as a record of reclamation and renewal. The true inheritance wasn't Harold's money. It was the recognition that my life belongs to me, not to my child, not to societal expectations of maternal sacrifice, not to institutions that see age as diminishment. Whatever time remains is mine to shape, to experience, to live fully on my own terms. That knowledge, hard-won through pain and struggle, is the legacy I hope to leave for others through the Foundation's work. And perhaps, in time, through reconciliation with Robert, not by forgetting what happened, but by creating something new from its ashes, something built on mutual respect rather than obligation, on choice rather than expectation. What a strange and unexpected gift this stroke has ultimately proven to be the catalyst for losing everything I thought mattered, only to discover what truly does. I closed the journal and turned my attention to the sunset painting the horizon in brilliant hues, a metaphor too obvious to articulate, but too beautiful to ignore. Whatever darkness had come before, this present moment held its own luminous possibility. And that, finally, was enough. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.